5:37. Hi there, Scott Sands. Shaggy's here on sports. Producer Dan, and a couple of hours ago in the first hour of the program at 3:35, we talked to Amar Allo. He is a Syrian immigration attorney here in Toledo, and we talked about the vetting process a little bit and how Syrian immigration of refugees is working. And I'm looking at my email now, and it's going to take me the rest of the night if I have to respond to everybody individually. But we do have a differing opinion from what Amar had to present for us today, and making his case for welcoming Syrian refugees with open arms for the most part. Debbie Georgatos has been on with us before. LadiesCanWeTalk.org is her website, and on Twitter, @DebbieCanWeTalk. Debbie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Ohio, along with Michigan, Indiana, and I think about 25, 30 other states have joined together to tell the federal government, look, even if you're going to continue with the refugee policy, we don't want anybody to relocate, to resettle in our states. Ohio, one of them. Kasich, of course, perhaps making a political statement since he's running for the presidency, but doesn't seem to be alone. Is this a wise strategy by these Republican governors?
I think it'll be the single decisive issue of this campaign, not just immigration broadly, which is a big issue, but this particular issue, because I think Americans are tuned in more than they ever have been before, watching what happened in Paris, understanding that Islam in various forms is, whether it's ISIS in Syria and Iraq or Boko Haram in Uganda, around the world is in an aggressive mode right now. And so I think that Americans they're way with the governor saying we need to stop bringing these people here. It's not xenophobic or hateful or racist. We just don't know what they think about what they think their role is in America, what they think their purpose in coming here is. I think it's a safety issue, it's a security issue, and I also think we ought to focus on helping them over there somewhere in the Middle East, nearer to where their home is.
Now, the whole question, though, it shouldn't be about what their motivation is. Isn't the motivation to get away from bombs, to get away from murderers, to get away from the same people who are threatening our homeland, threatening Paris, the radical Islam movement in ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Boko Haram, as you mentioned, are the ones killing these Syrians who want to get away and bring their families to America where they could be safe?
Yes, it is true that there are many innocent refugees who have exactly that purpose. Our problem in America is, as I had on my radio show this past Sunday, Claire Lopez, who's one of the preeminent national experts in Islamic terrorism, she's saying they are simply unvettable, that we can say we're trying, we're doing our best, but ISIS has announced they are placing terrorists within these Syrian refugee groups. It's a gamble that's not worth it to America because we can't know with certainty, and even 1, 2, 10, 100 terrorists among tens of thousands could be just catastrophic for America. There's no reason to bring them here.
I'm kind of playing devil's advocate because I'm not open to just dropping our borders and letting anybody in. I think to be smart about this, but America was built on the backs of immigrants, and we went through similar debates prior to World War II and other moments in history. America has had to be a leader. We're not leading in a lot of ways, and I wonder if this might be a way that America can become a leader by doing something for these Syrians who, as well as refugees from other countries who are looking for a safe place to call home. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to be admitted without question. And that's one of the things I spoke with Amar Allo about earlier. He's a Syrian immigration attorney who was trying to explain the vetting process. What do you mean by saying that they are unvettable? My concern is that we simply don't have the databases in the background available from the Syrian government or a trusting database from someone like President Assad in Syria. But it is, from what I understand now, to be an 18-month to 2-year process at minimum before any of these refugees are actually resettled in America. It's not a case of 10,000 Syrians on our shores tomorrow that need to find a place to live.
It's not a zero vetting process. That is true. There's an effort to do that. But if you were a terrorist and your ultimate goal was to serve, as you understand your duty to be in Islam, to serve the cause of Islam and spread Islam around the world and be part of the international jihadist movement, you can get through any process giving the answers that will be logical to give. There's no way to know it is in anyone's heart as they're coming here. And as far as America being, going back to your starting point about America being setting an example for the world, America does set an example in many ways. We have been the largest donor by far to the UN fund for Syria. We are sending money. We can send food. We can help with housing. We can send money and assistance without bringing people here. We can't be sure how they think and what their goals are. I mean, it's especially in this era, watching not just what happened in Paris, but what's happening around the world. There are many pockets of Islamic aggression. We have homegrown terrorism already happening here. We have open FBI investigations in all 50 states right now about ISIS pockets. And so the idea that we're somehow going to say we're sure all these people we're bringing here are not a problem, it's not even close to common sense. We can help them over there, and I don't think it doesn't mean that we don't want the innocent ones to find a new life, but there's no reason to take the risk of bringing them here now.
Well, and you touched on a couple of things that have me somewhere in the middle of both sides of this question, and that's the money that we're donating to the United Nations. In my opinion, a lot of that is throwing good money after bad. It's not getting where it needs to go, and in many cases, the food, the aid, the money that we send is winding up in our enemies' hands, in ISIS's hands, in Assad's hands, and it's not doing these people who need it the most any good. You also mentioned how many homegrown terrorists we have, and that's we in this country, in the United States, and even the attacks on Friday the 13th in Paris, all began by citizens and people who had lived in that country for several years, and homegrown terrorists here in the United States are being radicalized on the computer sitting in their parents' basement. We don't need refugees to commit acts of terror in the U.S. when we have people here already who are United States-born citizens willing to do the same thing for ISIS.
Yes, we have American citizens for every reason, and actually we have a lot of growth of allegiance to Islam coming out of the prison population. We have people around the country who are finding online and becoming radicalized for whatever reason, but that's an argument. So don't bring more here. I mean, don't bring more people here who are, now I'll tell you something that's very interesting for your listeners that I talk about in my show too. If you read over in many Middle Eastern countries that are Muslim majority, you can find statements, and these aren't like 100 years ago. These are modern day courts, justices, college professors, elementary schools. What many of the Islamic leaders, imams, leaders of the mosques are teaching is that jihad is your duty as a Muslim. It's not, and so the point being, we don't know what they're taught about Islam in the countries they are. The problem is Islam. It's not individuals in Syria. It's Islam, and so
and Debbie, I want to ask you to be clear about this. Are you saying the problem is Islam, or is the problem radicalized Islam?
Well, I'll tell you, very recently I've started changing the way I refer to it because you can find, as what I was alluding to a moment ago, which you can find from many experts talking about this, is Islam itself is teaching jihad. And so the problem is not every single Muslim. There are countless peaceful, non-aggressive Muslims, countless. But Islam itself, especially in Middle Eastern countries, is being taught that jihad is teaching jihad is your duty. So that's my point. And who comes here from Syria? We don't know how they were taught. We don't know what they think their duty really is as a Muslim. So yes, I now say Islam itself is the problem. Not every single Muslim, but Islam and its core teachings in the Quran and all of the other writings is teaching exactly what the jihadists are doing.
We'll actually be talking to the Imam of the local Islamic Center tomorrow morning at 7:35 on Fred's show, who I'm sure will have something to say different than that it's not Islam in general that's to blame. Debbie Georgatos with us, ladiescanwetalk.org, her website, and Debbie Can We Talk on Twitter. Debbie, do you think that these governors, and I believe New Hampshire, who has a Democratic governor, is the only non-Republican controlled state to oppose taking in refugees, will these governors be effective in blocking President Obama's goal to have 10,000 Syrian refugees this year? It seems to be more of a federal concern legally from what I've read so far.
I keep hearing both sides of the legal argument. I'm a lawyer by background. I need to dive in and read more closely because I've heard people arguing it's not a constitutional requirement that that these states take these, and therefore the states have right to say no. And now I hear people say no. So I don't know what the answer is, but regardless of the court's answer, the constitutional answer, it is going to be, especially in Texas and places that have been very strong about this, it's going to be a seminal issue in the election. It's going to be, I think, the difference between the Democrat and Republican candidates will be stark on this issue. And I do think that governors, it may come to a very, very tense standoff. And so I don't think the governors are just going to salute, even if they get a court ruling, if the federal government gets a ruling saying that you have to accept it if we say so. I think it's going to get very tense. I don't think the governors are going to surrender lightly.
Which presidential candidates do you think stand to benefit most from this newly divisive issue? And I've said from the beginning, immigration should be one of the top issues in campaign 2016. Governor Kasich, Governor Chris Christie, Bobby Jindal dropped out yesterday, so he's no longer in the race. One of the smartest guys in the race, actually, but along with Scott Walker, we're losing some of the executives who are running for the presidency on the Republican side. Do Kasich and Christie stand again by taking a stand, or does somebody like Donald Trump, who's been talking out against immigration from the very beginning, have a stronger position on the campaign trail?
I think that so far it has inured to Donald Trump's benefit. He is seen as someone being really strong, and I'm not saying he's my candidate at all, but he's been seen from the start as very strong, not just in immigration, but on just this kind of rule of law, law and order. We're going to be in charge of our country. We're not going to be overrun. So I think Ted Cruz and Donald Trump on the Republican side, it'll inure to their benefit because and I think also to the extent they can start talking about, this is a different issue, very different from the southern border and having uncontrolled crossing of the border and people coming to America without a legal right to be here. That's a separate question from the danger of potential terrorism created by bringing more and more Syrian refugees here, and the candidates will have to define that difference. I thought the Democrat debate on Saturday night, when they all were saying they were competing for who would bring more people here, more Syrians here, and faster, and who was happier about it, I think that was a tone-deaf reaction to how America feels right now after Paris. I think that will hurt all three of them.
Debbie, did I see a tweet from you earlier that said you would be okay letting Syrian Christians into the country as refugees as long as they were not Muslims?
Yes, I think I don't have my Twitter account open in front of me, but yes, the basic notion of if we're going to bring anyone from Syria, why don't we bring the Christians? It's a great question. You know the countries, I'll just quick tell your listeners, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, UAE, they're all Muslim-majority countries. They won't take any refugees. I mean, other countries, I can see where we are the only country likely to open our doors to Christians. So if we're going to be taking people and we can, vet them and know they're Christian, sure, I think that would be a better plan for America. And really, we're the only safe haven who should offer to bring them here.
And how do you vet Syrians to be Christian?
Absolutely, very, very good question and very difficult. I don't know if those churches have records or some other way of knowing. And you're right, it's a difficult challenge. But if we're going to bring anybody here, I would say go for bringing the Christians. And you're right, you got to vet them, and that's hard.
Debbie Georgatos, Ladies Can We Talk.org, and on Twitter at Debbie Can We Talk, as always, and enjoy the conversation with you, ma'am.
Scott, great talking to you. Thanks for having me.